I'm Katie Couric. Tonight, after the veto, the search for a compromise to pay for the war.
I'm confident that we can reach agreement.
Democrats are committed to ending this war.
Also tonight, a health care crisis. An exclusive look at a new report that finds more than 25% of our children have no regular access to medical care. And a new honor for the men and women who died trying to shine a light through the fog of war.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Hello, everyone. The stage is now set for a final compromise on legislation to pay for the war in Iraq. After the president vetoed a bill that included a timetable for troop withdrawal, the House attempted to override it today, but fell 62 votes short. The president says he's confident they'll reach a compromise. What he is not so confident about anymore is succeeding in Iraq. Listen carefully to what he said today. It's something he hasn't said before. Here's Jim Axelrod.
A day after President Bush vetoed the Democrats' bill that called for troop withdrawal deadlines, he sat down with the congressional leaders who sent it to him.
Yesterday was a day that highlighted differences. Today's a day where we can work together to find common ground.
But happy faces in a photo op don't mask the most significant divide between the two branches of government since Vietnam.
Make no mistake, Democrats are committed to ending this war, and we hope to do so in unison with the President of the United States.
Today's unsuccessful attempt in the House to get a two-thirds margin and override the veto.
The yeas are 222, the nays are 203.
Reminded Democrats, as much as they want to force the president to bring troops home, they simply don't have the votes.
Today, the president can veto our attempt to secure a safe, orderly, phased redeployment of our troops, but he can't veto reality.
Since withdrawal deadlines are a non-starter, Democrats may now get some cooperation from Republicans on benchmarks, ways to gauge Iraqi progress in their country.
I'm hopeful that that will be where we go, because it makes sense to me to have a public document telling the Maliki government, here's what we expect you to try to accomplish sooner rather than later.
This debate has produced some changes for the president as well, who for the first time today raised the possibility of defeat.
Slowly but surely, the truth will be known. Either we'll succeed or we won't succeed. And the definition of success, as I described, is, sectarian violence down. Success is not no violence.
One thing both sides agree on, they must reach some kind of compromise that funds the troops, and soon. Their goal? Memorial Day. Jim Axelrod, CBS News, the White House.
I'm David Martin at the Pentagon. Secretary of State Rice arrived in Egypt today for talks with Iraq's Prime Minister Maliki, the head of a divided government which Paul Hughes of the U.S. Institute for Peace says is now the thin reed on which American success depends.
The fundamental weakness in the American strategy right now is the reliance on the Iraqi government to produce some tangible movement forward.
That means, among other things, a fair division of Iraq's oil wealth among its Shiite, Sunni, and Kurdish factions. The Iraqi government announced today it has sent a draft oil law to the parliament, but it's by no means a done deal.
That law is still up in the air.
4,000 more American troops are moving into Iraq this week in an attempt to put a lid on the violence and buy the Iraqi government more time. But the Iraqi parliament plans to take a 2-month summer recess. The U.S. ambassador is dead set against that.
It would be pretty hard to understand if the Council of Representatives takes a 2-month break when critical issues for the nation's future may still be pending.
The U.S. military will decide in September whether the surge is working. Not time enough, according to former State Department official Carlos Pascual.
I think it's completely unrealistic that the Iraqis can make progress in the kind of timelines that we have actually defined.
But the president warned today that if America fails in Iraq, all that oil, the third largest reserves in the world, could fall under the control of Islamic extremists. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
More bad luck for NASA today. A freight train carrying rockets used on the shuttle went off the tracks in Demopolis, Alabama. Here's Bob Orr.
The derailment happened in a rural part of Alabama when a bridge collapsed under a freight train. carrying parts of booster rockets used to launch the space shuttle. One of the cars carrying one fully fueled rocket section overturned, but there was no fire, no explosion, and NASA says no danger. And the rocket maker, ATK Thiokol, insists it would take a significant fire to set it off. The so-called solid rocket boosters, or SRBs, are the two skinny tubes connected to the large external fuel tank and attached to the belly of the shuttle. The boosters are like giant bottle rockets. They burn a rubbery fuel at 5,000 degrees and under a tremendous pressure to propel the shuttle 28 miles into the sky. Each SRB is made up of 4 sections, stacked one on top of another. There were 8 of those rocket sections on the derailed train, 6 to be used on Discovery in October, the other 2 on Atlantis in December. Space experts on the scene say it won't be difficult to clear the wreckage, and even if the rockets are damaged, that shouldn't interrupt the shuttle's flight schedule. But any delay could threaten the space agency's ability to complete the International Space Station by its 2010 deadline. Bob Orr, CBS News, Washington.
The FDA has been warning for some time now that giving children antidepressants could actually raise their risk of suicide. Today, the agency said it wants to expand that warning to include young adults. Right now, labels for Prozac and other antidepressants carry a suicide warning for children and adolescents. The FDA says it plans to expand that to include adults between the ages of 18 and 24. The older we get, the greater our risk of osteoporosis, a disease that makes our bones fragile. The word itself means porous bone. 10 million Americans have osteoporosis, 80% of them women, and that leads to 1.5 million fractures every year. But what if you only had to take 1 dose of medicine a year? A new osteoporosis treatment may be just what the doctor ordered. Here's Dr. John LaPook.
You lost a tooth?
80-year-old Midge Hatzman has been living with osteoporosis for 20 years. It's caused fractures in her spine, ankle, and wrists.
Hey, Mrs. Hatzman, how are you?
She can't tolerate the current drugs, taken monthly or weekly. These pills are not easy to take. To avoid severe heartburn, patients must drink a full glass of water and stay upright for up to an hour.
You know, I used to be taller.
Midge was eager to test a new drug called zoledronic acid, or Reclast. It's given intravenously and lasts for a year because it binds to the bone.
It worked very well, but no side effects whatsoever. Wonderful.
A 3-year study published today in the New England Journal of Medicine looked at over 7,700 women past menopause. Patients with osteoporosis taking Reclast had a 70% decrease in spine fractures and a 41% reduction in hip fractures.
It is at least as effective, if not more effective, than the other drugs that are currently available for osteoporosis.
Researchers also found slightly more than 1% of patients had a serious irregular heartbeat.
1, 2, 3.
Midge says she's had no broken bones since taking the medication. Experts say reducing fractures can save lives.
20% of women who fracture their hip will be dead within 12 months. 25% of women who fracture their hip will never live unassisted again.
I have slipped a couple of times and no problems, so I am keeping my fingers crossed. Good throw.
The drug is already approved to treat bone cancer. The FDA is expected to decide this fall whether to approve it for osteoporosis. Katie?
Dr. John LaPook, thank you, John. And now to the health of our children. We have an exclusive look tonight at a stunning report by a respected children's healthcare group. It says nearly 24 million children in this country do not have regular access to medical care, and that's twice as many as experts believed. Here's Cheryl Atkinson.
Thank you. These uninsured children of the working poor don't go to the doctor's office. Temperature. It comes to them.
They make too much in order to be eligible for Medicaid, but don't make enough to provide insurance of their own.
150,000 patients a year nationwide get free care from 21 mobile units provided by the Children's Health Fund. But a new report out tomorrow from this nonprofit group says far too many kids are falling into a huge health care crevice. Their report finds despite billions of dollars in government spending, more than 1 in 4 children still don't have full-time health care, a gap twice as big as anyone thought.
It's more than just insurance. and lack of insurance that are keeping kids from getting medical care.
It's estimated 9 million children are completely uninsured, but the new study says 11.5 million more kids end up without medical care for part of the year, and another 3 million can't get a ride to the doctor. That's over 23 million children. To close the gap, President of the Children's Health Fund, Irwin Redlener, is on Capitol Hill lobbying for a dramatic expansion of the $5 billion Federal Children's Health Insurance Program, or CHIP. Redlener wants to add 9 million more people to CHIP, plus dental and mental health benefits and transportation. The price tag for all that...
Well, really what we need is $60 billion, between $50 and $60 billion. If we
Getting that type of government assistance may be a long shot, but Dr. Redlener says it's cheaper than the cost of neglecting the medical needs of a generation of children. Cheryl Atkinson, CBS News, Washington.
And we have much more CBS News ahead. Coming up next, are your kids glued to their computer screens? We'll show you a boot camp designed to help them kick the habit. Now tonight's Eye on Technology, and a question: how much time do your kids spend on the internet? I don't even want to think about it. The average child in this country spends nearly 21 hours a month checking out more than 1,000 web pages. The internet can be seductive and addictive. Tonight, Barry Peterson shows you what the Chinese are doing about it as we conclude our special series, Caught in the Web.
Boot camp opens at dawn. It looks military, but it's really an inpatient medical clinic treating perhaps the world's newest disorder, internet addiction, which officials define as spending more than 4 hours a day online. Li Hongyi is 18. All I thought about was internet games, he says, whenever I was awake and even when sleeping. This game with toy guns is part of therapy which only rich parents can afford, shelling out $1,200 a month. A game that gets kids back into the real world, playing with other kids. Not playing games like World of Warcraft, where kids can become one of a class of characters, like this one called a paladin. Or games that keep players enthralled by constantly challenging them with higher levels.
You are not prepared.
While some experts may question whether or not internet addiction is really a disease, here in China, this disease has the government's stamp of approval. To prove the danger, authorities showed 13-year-old Zheng Xiaoyi in a high-rise elevator before jumping to his death. His suicide note said it was his escape to the virtual world. But the government's concern may have a darker motive, fear of what it cannot control.
The Chinese government is still very clear that assembly and organization that's not within the government system is not permitted, for anywhere from a chess club or book club all the way to a political party.
Trainer Zhang Yanan sees a younger generation facing something new in China, the intense need to succeed. Parents push kids to get into the best colleges so they'll get rich, she explains. If kids can't fulfill these goals, they abandon themselves in the internet. Some cases require medications, and the worst can include mild shock therapy. Director Dr. John Tao says 70% of the kids who leave here are cured. We replace bad habits, he says, with exercise, eating meals, and sleeping at regular times. Good habits change their future. China has only a handful of these clinics, but with internet use exploding, they may need a lot more to rescue kids trapped in the web. Barry Peterson, CBS News, Beijing.
And still ahead, the American woman who may have one of the toughest jobs in the world. An international court issued its first arrest warrants today in connection with the genocide in Darfur. A Sudanese government minister and a militia leader are accused of mass murder, rape, and torture. Darfur is in western Sudan. Despite a peace agreement last year, a 4-year-old civil war between black Africans and Arab militias backed by the government goes on. It has killed as many as 400,000. 3 million more are now in refugee camps, and heroic efforts are being made to help them. Alan Pizzi reports tonight from Darfur.
The welcome is as urgent as it is exuberant.
Somewhere in the middle of the crowd is the American woman whose job is to feed millions of innocent victims of a devastating and ongoing war in Darfur. Barely 3 weeks after taking over as head of the world's largest aid agency, Josette Sheeran has come to the middle of the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Most of the food aid in these camps goes to women to ensure it feeds families and is not sold on.
We'll do what it takes to be able to reach people, often at great risk to our own staff.
3 million people have fled to the relative safety of these camps, and in spite of the peace agreement, fighting continues, cutting off aid workers from those most in need.
We've had a series of carjackings. Since June of last year, the World Food Program has had 45 incidents, security incidents.
And Sheeran must work with the Sudanese government, the same people who sponsor the Janjaweed, an Arab militia that has rampaged across Darfur. More than 1,500 villages have been burned, and Washington has accused the Janjaweed of genocide against black Africans. But the conflict is more complex than that. 3 years ago, the people in this camp had only 2 armed groups to fear and flee. Today, more than a dozen militias are running rampant throughout Darfur, each with their own agenda and paymaster. A 7,000-strong African Union peacekeeping force can barely look after itself, never mind protecting displaced people or aid workers from non-governmental organizations.
There are towns where we used to have NGOs and UN that have been abandoned because it's just become so insecure. For me, things have just gotten worse and worse.
Helicopters are now the only way to move aid workers safely around Darfur, but another $27 million is needed to keep them flying to the end of the year. But so far, money for food aid has been easier to find than the will to confront the Sudanese government over the crisis. And until a political solution is found to the war, these people won't be going home anytime soon. Alan Pizzi, CBS News, Khartoum, Darfur.
And coming up next, paying tribute to those who died, trying to bring us the truth about war. Finally tonight, they went to war armed not with rifles, but with pens and microphones and cameras. In France today, a memorial was unveiled to honor these heroes who died in pursuit of the truth. Richard Roth was there.
Normandy's fields are where memories lie in rows of tombstone tributes to men and women who fell in battle. Today, another honor row was opened for journalists who died while doing their jobs. 1,889 names on a roll call that's still being counted. From Iraqi reporter Akil Sahan, killed in Baghdad last December, this list goes back to Washington Post reporter Raymond Clapper, killed in the Pacific 63 years ago. 1944 is when this part of Normandy was liberated by Allied troops, a turning point in a long world war. But its newest memorial embraces many other wars and honors sacrifice that wasn't always on a battlefield. So while Ernie Pyle is here, the reporter who wrote of soldiers asleep on Normandy's beaches, some of them sleeping forever, and so are the men who photographed Vietnam and died there. Here, too, is Veronica Guerin's name. She investigated organized crime and was gunned down on a street in Dublin. And Anna Politkovskaya, who met a similar fate in Moscow. Here's Bill Stewart, executed 28 years ago by a Nicaraguan soldier, and Daniel Pearl, murdered in Pakistan. Paul Douglas and James Brolin are here, too. They were our own. CBS newsmen killed just a year ago by a roadside bomb in Baghdad. Mourning the death of his journalist son, a Frenchman here said it's not just honor that's been etched in stone, it's a universal truth. All who die for freedom deserve to be remembered. Richard Roth, CBS News, Bayeux, France.
And that's the CBS Evening News. I'm Katie Couric. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.